best of luck with that. Now, if you suffer from frequent stomach aches and bloating with no apparent cause, you could have an underlying food intolerance.
But how do you find out what you are intolerant to? Leading allergy expert Professor Adam Fox joins us now. Morning.
Good morning.
So to see you back again.
Morning.
Thank you. Always a very popular part of the show. What is a food intolerance?
So food intolerance is where you just don't get on with a particular food. You're sensitive to it in a way that other people aren't. So if somebody else eats it, they're fine, but if you eat it, you get symptoms.
And is there a difference between a food intolerance and an allergy?
There's a really important difference. So an allergy involves your immune system, and what that means in practice is that although usually the symptoms aren't too bad, it is potentially dangerous.
Right.
Food intolerances won't kill you, but they can cause really unpleasant symptoms.
So what are the common symptoms? What would you expect to feel?
Lots of people react in different ways, but I think the most common symptoms we hear about will be tummy symptoms. So tummy aches, loose stools, lots of wind. But then other people will get symptoms such as their nose being blocked or headaches, achy joints, a whole range of different things.
So how can you find out what food you're intolerant to? Because I imagine that's the tricky part.
It's really, really tricky. So unlike allergies where we have tests that really help diagnose something, with food intolerance, we don't have any decent tests, and that makes it much more difficult. So, of course, getting a really clear story about there being a problem only when you have certain foods and not when you don't have that food is helpful, but often it comes down to elimination diets. Now, those are hard, especially if you suspect something like wheat or dairy. Cutting that sort of thing out of your diet is really hard work.
How long, if you were thinking, right, okay, that's what I'm going to do, obviously there's an issue, I can feel an issue here, so I'm going to cut out dairy. How long before you would expect the effects of you having dairy before to wear off and know, that's what it is?
Well, I think the first thing to mention is that you have to be really careful here, because if you're getting symptoms like chronic tummy aches, or certainly if you're getting symptoms like weight loss, your stools have changed, so you've started to get diarrhea, there's blood or mucus in your stools, the first thing to do is to have a chat with your doctor about it. Don't try and start taking things out of your diet yourself, because there's a danger that you're going to miss an important diagnosis.
Right, okay.
So it's always take pause. If you've seen your doctor, you're comfortable that there isn't anything serious going on, then probably the sensible first thing to do is think about keeping a food diary. So see if you can relate when your symptoms are to certain foods. And also have a chat with a dietitian. They're an excellent resource. They're the real experts in this area. And they're really good at guiding not just what's worth trying to cut out, but also how you replace it so you don't lose anything you need in your diet.
So quite often online, or you get offers where they go, oh, here's an intolerance kit, try this. Would you use that? Are they good? Do they work?
No. I mean, they're obviously very tempting, because the idea that you can do a simple test, whether it's hair analysis or a blood test, there's a whole range of different things, but none of them have any real scientific validity. None of them have really been proven to work for these sorts of food intolerances. So really, it's the old-fashioned way, working out what it is by cutting it out, reintroducing it to see if the symptoms get worse. And that's another really important point, is that just because things get better when you cut something out doesn't mean that you got better because you cut it out. And I think often there's a bit of a tendency that people will make that immediate association. They say, oh, I've stopped eating this, I'm feeling better, so it must be because of that. You don't really prove that point until you reintroduce that food and you get a return of those symptoms.
I see. So this little kit you've got here, that's just...
Yeah, so this is an example of the many things that you can get online, which is, in the nicest possible way, it's quackery.
I see.
They sort of, they have the promise that you do this test and it's going to come and tell you all these different things. And in my experience, usually people send it off. They come back with long lists of things that they need to cut out of their diet in order to feel better. Actually, cutting that number of things out is usually impossible, and so of course there's always an excuse for why it didn't work, because you weren't really able to cut everything out. I would really steer clear of these sorts of tests.
So then maybe the next step, if you were struggling, you'd see a specialist. At what point do you go to see a specialist?
Well, I think having a chat with your GP is a sensible first start, particularly if it's things like chronic pain, change in your bowel habit, weight loss, blood or mucus in the stools. Those are all red flags that say actually something serious could be going on here. Celiac disease, for example, can be really easy to miss. So that's not a food intolerance. It's what we call an autoimmune disease, but it's when your body has got a problem with gluten that's in wheat. Now, one of the tricky things here is that the best test for celiac disease requires you to still have the wheat in your diet. So if you decide, I think wheat's the problem, and cut it out, it can then be really difficult to get a diagnosis. You can end up missing the problem because the test won't work anymore.
Very quickly, is there a way to cure food intolerance if you've worked out you've got one?
Not really. I mean, it's ideally it's knowing what it is so you can steer clear. If it's a specific problem like lactose intolerance, then you can take lactase, which is the stuff that breaks lactose down, as a powder before you have milk, for example, and that can sort that out.
Okay. Thank you. Fascinating. Lots of information. Very nice to see you as well. Right, your local weather forecast is on the way in just a moment.